Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cambridge Photography Week and our on-demand content online. I'm absolutely delighted to have Vilokini with me today, chatting about her work, Abandoned Places. So let's get on with the chat. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks very much. Let's get on with it. Let's have a bit of an introduction into yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so for many years, over 20 years, I worked as a freelance magazine stylist and writer.
Lovely. Okay.
So I worked for Home Interest magazine. So I worked for Homes and Gardens, Homes and Antiques. I did one feature on Darwin for the World of Interiors on his rooms.
Oh, wow.
And I styled many books on crafts and interiors. And I worked with a photographer called Mark Scott. So we got very close, we became very close friends, and we went all around the world photographing houses from Florida, Santorini, Cape Town. I had a really great time. Photographing houses, writing about houses, meeting house owners. So actually houses have always been my thing. Interiors have always been my thing.
Okay.
And I was also an interior designer in Cambridge. So I did that sort of work for a long, long time. And then I thought, I've sort of come to the end of this. I want to get something a bit deeper going on in my life. By then I was a Buddhist, and I was leading art retreats for women. And I thought, well, what I want is to give a bit more meat to this. So I did the MA printmaking course at Anglia Ruskin. And that really changed everything, because I was working with printmaking techniques and I had to learn photography in order to show my work. And I'd always thought, oh, Mark was so brilliant. I'd always thought I couldn't be a photographer, but I'd always been the other side of the camera. So I was setting up shots. So the composition, every shot we did, Mark would say, what do you want next? What do you want next? So I'd go around houses, setting shots up. And then we photograph sometimes for the interior design company that I set up with a friend. So I thought, I can't be a photographer because that's too technical for me, but I had to learn when I was at ARU. So I did a course at Long Road, evening class. No, it was Hills Road, actually, Hills Road Sixth Form College. And just learnt the basics, bought a Nikon D32. And then gradually the work morphed from printmaking into photography, because I was very interested in the Cambridge Buddhist Centre, which you may know is in a Georgian theatre built in 1814. So I was so interested in the forgotten places, the abandoned places at the top of the building, which basically is unchanged. It's still got the Georgian cast iron flare holders. It's still got the Victorian canvases that were painted, put on top of the Georgian wood. So for my MA project, I basically crawled around in the dust for months, just taking photographs. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because there wasn't that much. There were a few old bits of wall. But then I watched the light coming in through the windows as I was there more and more. And I got a sort of intimacy with the place and started to feel the absence and the loss of all the people that had been in that building. Because it had been a Christian mission hall. It had been a state-of-the-art theatre in the 1920s. It's had a fascinating history. So I was photographing the spaces. I was making prints from the photographs. I was putting the prints back on the walls and photographing those. And then I made a series of photopolymer prints, which is, it's an etching technique using negatives. So that was really interesting. That was my MA show. And then I found a photographer called Tim Clinch. And I found him in a magazine called Black and White Photography. I really liked his style of writing. And I contacted him and I went on a week's photography course with Tim in Bulgaria. And he was completely so important in getting me. He's a commercial photographer, but he just pushed me out of my comfort zone. So we photographed, and you'll see these in the photos, we photographed monasteries, painted monasteries. I did food, I did travel, I did all sorts with Tim. And during lockdown, of course, there was no work for photographers. Tim and a friend of his called Joanna McClellan set up an online workshop course called To Photographers, which anyone can go to any week. And throughout lockdown, there were assignments every month, and people from all over the world. Tim lives in Bulgaria, Joanna lives in the south of France. People come from America, from New Zealand, from Australia. And the assignments were just so important because it meant that I was taking photographs of things that I wouldn't normally do. And that's Tim's whole thing, is to say, don't just photograph the same thing. Mm. So I've got quite a big portfolio now of work, but for this project that we're going to look at, I've called it Abandoned Places, because it's comes out of my interest in a Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi, which I'm sure lots of people have heard about. And wabi-sabi is finding a sort of sad beauty in things that are passing, which is very much philosophy. That's how things are. Things are all on their way out. Mm. So what's happening with this project is I've got my love of architecture and buildings and interiors, but I'm photographing bits of them that are basically passing away, degrading, and finding the beauty in that. So they're details mainly, but I'm looking for texture, I'm looking for colour, and I'm also looking for the composition of the geometric. So it's a sort of geometric, organic, double whammy, really. So and yes, sorry.
No, so that your writing background as well. I think there's the thing about identifying stories in things, isn't it? And I suppose that draws you to shots in a way that maybe doesn't with other people. Finding the story behind something or being curious about the story behind something, I suppose, opens up a whole new world, doesn't it?
Well, that's absolutely right, because every single one of my shots, what's drawn me to them in a way is the sense that someone's made it, someone's used it, someone's lived in it, and they're not there. So it's the sense of absence, the human story, the human experience, underlies everything. Yeah.
And if you're talking to people who interested in your work, then that story side of things is, I mean, it's fascinating talking to you about it already, so to have those stories connected with it and be able to tell people about those stories behind your shots is only going to be good for your photography, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, if you're going to be a photographer, you need to follow something that really engages you. It's not just a matter of taking pictures. It's a matter of, well, what is my passion? What do I love? And in a way, I took the photographs, and then later on, I started to understand what the link was and why I was doing it. It wasn't necessarily conscious. Because one of my first projects I did, I would go on retreat in Sussex, and there was a 1950s caravan in the woods. And I followed the progress of that caravan falling down. So I photographed it in various stages. And then I thought, why am I so interested in that caravan? Because when I was a child, we had holidays in Cornwall in exactly that sort of caravan.
Okay.
And I just found it so poignant watching it just fall, just collapse, really. Yeah.
Well, I think to be able to make the most of your time, because everyone's busy doing lots of things, aren't they? And if photography is not your full-time job, then to really know what makes you want to click, what clicks with you is really important, isn't it? So I think that thing of self-reflections, and questioning yourself is really important.
Yeah. And I found this summer, which we were talking about in the panel discussion on Saturday at the Hilton Hotel, having my work up, and I was there for 2 weekends, and I just talked about the work to everyone that came through, and that was so useful because it made me really learn more about myself, actually, why I'd been doing things. Yeah,
it's true. Putting yourself out there, which in itself helps you learn about yourself, and then being able to communicate it and get the feedback. It's anyway. Should we start spinning through some of your some of your pieces then. Let's go for the first one. So tell us a bit about this one.
So this photograph was taken in the Bulgarian village of Mindia, which is where Tim Clinch lives. Okay. So I was on a workshop with Tim. I lived in the barn in his garden and went out every day. This was just on an afternoon or an evening walk around the village. Now, Mindia used to have a road running through it. And then the EU money meant that the government built a road that bypassed the village. So the village started to sort of die. This was a shop, actually, the most beautiful architecture, beautiful vernacular architecture. This was a shop door. So it's been abandoned for a long, long time. And I really loved the geometric shapes and the fact that the wood was greying, it was breaking down, but lovely textures and lovely colours. And I've noticed really a lot of my colours in my work is quite muted. You know, I don't really do a lot of bright colours. So this was a shop. I just like that colour range, really. I think it helps to keep. Some people like bright colours. I mean, I do in my life, but I've just noticed that it's the subtleties that bring out the texture.
Yeah.
Okay, and if things are on their way to passing out, on their way to disintegrating, colours fade, paint fades in the sun, it flakes, wood fades into this beautiful grey. So often the things I'm photographing are, they're faded. Yeah. So
but there's a lot to tell, as you say, from what you said already. There's a lot to say about, you know, there's a story behind here, and even like looking through the glass, there's stuff behind there, isn't there? In that in itself,
there's a lot in that shop.
It suggests a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When was it abandoned? Oh my goodness me.
So the story would probably be, I don't know the story of that shop, but it was a thriving shop. It's a beautiful building. I don't know what they sold because, you know, so many of the buildings are abandoned in that village. And the story of life, really, of people's commercial life. A lot of people in that village are now moved away, but their children are now coming back and buying holiday homes and going back to the village. So hopefully it's being regenerated.
Fingers crossed. And then this one. Yeah,
so that's another image from the Bulgarian trip. So we went to this beautiful painted monastery. There are a lot of painted monasteries in Bulgaria. And how they survive, how that paint survives, I don't know, because this was on a mountain. It has heavy snow in winter. It's very cold in winter, very hot in summer.
Okay.
And the buildings, every inch of them, inside and out, are painted with these beautiful patterns. And I was quite attracted to that window because I love that utilitarian heating pipe sticking out of the window and the electric wire. So again, there's that sense that someone has had an input to that, apart from the painting. But, you know, they got the plumber in and he just pushed the pipe through the window. But I really love that sense of someone's walked out of the shot. They've walked out of the image and made their mark before they left. And the colours, again, they're very faded, beautiful, soft terracottas and blues. And also there's the architectural element of the shapes in the window.
Yeah, it's and as you say, the weather battering that building, you know, over the years, it's pretty impressive that it's stayed the test of time, really.
Well, one little story about that. Behind the building, Tim told me that there's a massive, massive rock that fell off the mountaintop, and it missed the building by inches. So it felt like it was protected, you know, by some sort of safety, spiritual safety there.
There's an aura, but like St. Paul's surrounded by, you know, during World War II, St. Paul's surrounded by, you know, smoke and still standing strong because of some sort of aura around it. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Yeah, definitely. It feels very apt, absolutely. And so this one here, so bit more on the utility side of things, isn't it? I suppose.
This is one of my favourite shots I've ever done, actually. So a few years ago, I was working on a house in Herefordshire.
Right.
They were dividing their house up and making one of them into a holiday let. Beautiful house. So while I was there, the couple said to me, would you like to go have a trip around the Western Cider Mill, which is just down the road? Okay. And I always liked factories. I love going around factories and seeing how things are made. So Western Cider Mill, you went round and you saw all the modern equipment, but it had been there since about 1850.
Oh, wow.
So there was the old cider press and there was all the modern factory bit. And when you went outside, this was a massive, and there's a series of massive storage tanks. Presumably, they've got cider in them. Massive. And this was a shot that I took as I was walking around. It was on my Nikon, my DSLR. And what I like about that, it was a January day, so the weather was quite grey and overcast. And there were no shadows. I can never quite work out what those metal structures are. Are they 3D? Are they flat? They were actually 3D, but the light has sort of flattened them. And again, we've got the textures of the yellows and the greys completely faded. And I'm quite pleased with the composition of that. So you've got the rule of thirds, where you've got a third of the image is basically on the third on the right, taking the third of the picture, and on the bottom. So it's a utilitarian factory made thing, but it's got its own beauty with the colours and textures.
Absolutely, there's a lot going on there, isn't there, in terms of, you know, the years of giving it lots of expression, I suppose. That would be my way of trying to explain it. But it's lovely. It's a really nice shot. In fact, it even looks like I'm kind of get a kind of a Banksy-esque type feeling to it, because it looks like that it's painted on as well, especially the ladder.
Yeah, that's
what like that could be. Yeah, it could be painted on.
It could be a stencil like Banksy. You're right. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. So the other thing I'd like to say is that I never now, although I've done for the assignment, I never set up shots. I always take shots as I find shots. Yeah. So recently, since my trip to Bulgaria, I've been using my phone to take pictures mainly. So I've got a Huawei P30 and it has 3 Leica lenses. That was also recommended by Tim, because I've always got my phone with me. I never know when I'm going to come across a shot. Yeah, so I don't carrying a camera around, I just found, was a little bit clunky and I miss things. So this was on the camera. I took that camera around because I was doing work. I was working that week. But this is shot on the D32 and processed in Photoshop.
Lovely. Well, it's having something like your phone with like those Leica lenses in is, I think it's just important, because it just makes your photography a lot more accessible to you, and then I suppose that feeds everything else, doesn't it? So that you're always seeing that opportunity to take something. I think isn't there this thing about, I get the feeling, you've talked about why you said you really thinking about why you liked taking these kind of photos, and where you went back to that caravan, for example, and this thing, you seem to be very clear about what sparks you. So therefore, actually, when you're walking around and you see something, it's absolutely something you want to shoot, as opposed to just taking shots of anything.
That's right. It always sort of grabs me, and I say, "Oh, hang on, stop here. I've got to get a shot of this." So it's taken a long time to understand why I was doing things, because it was very much a visceral connection. And not all my work is this. I've got interested recently in looking at the fens, the history of the fens and the rewilding of the fens, but that's a different project. These are all my wabi-sabi architectural shots, which I'll be having in the exhibition. Yeah.
Lovely. Look forward to seeing it in the flesh, that's for sure. Okay, and this one.
So that's another one from that same series up at the Western Cider Mill. And I don't know what that equipment is. It's another, you can see that's a big round circular tank. And I just love that, the corrugations and the texture that had come from weather, really. It's algae on the blue. I love the fact that they painted these tanks such fabulous colours, and then the fading of them made them even better. And it's got that grey overlay. So I don't know what it is. It just, again, struck me as I was walking around, and really enjoyed the sort of the not knowing what that was. Seems to have.
Well, you can come up with your own explanation. Everyone can have their own different interpretation of it, which is part of the beauty of it.
Yes, and not have them too much explained. And here's another one. So I've got 3 from that series. That was much more complex.
Yeah.
But again, you know, there's piping, there's bits of equipment, I don't know what they are. And the colours I just thought were lovely, really stunning, all faded. And nature just taking over, really, with the algae and the patina, really, that builds up through the weathering. But mainly, I would say I was more interested in the composition of those. Yeah.
Is it? I mean, as looking at it, actually, you know, it looks like the top of it kind of feels a bit like it could be watercolor, and as it goes further down, it feels like it could be oil painting. I suppose that just goes to show about the richness of the variety and richness of the colors, doesn't it?
Yes, I think a lot of these are quite painterly, and I think it was the quality of light is everything. If I'd done those on a bright sunny day, that would be a completely different shot, because you'd have shadows as well. But I love the way that light just flattened everything out. And yes, I can see at the top there are 2 tanks there. There's one behind the other. So yeah, it's quite industrial, not domestic.
We go from industrial to something.
That's right. Yeah. We're going to now a project that my daughter lives in Yorkshire, and along the road I used to think, is this a prisoner of war camp? I could see sort of what looked like Nissen huts, and it said private keep out, but I couldn't resist it. I'd driven past it so many times, and I was up there. They were all at school and work, and I was thinking, I'll go and take some photographs. So I climbed over the gate, and this is a detail. What it is, it was called a camp school. And in the 1930s, there was quite a fashion for the government building camp schools for children that were in deprived areas of the cities, or even if people had got, you know, illnesses, but they weren't thriving. These children weren't thriving. So they built it just before the war. The idea was that children would go out there, get fresh country air, good food, and thrive from polluted cities. But then the war broke out, and it was used for evacuee children.
Okay.
And I've actually spoken to a woman of about 96, and she was evacuated to this place. Now, this shot is a detail of another one. There's no windows. The roofs are just about still on. It was abandoned in 1986 because it was used as a school right up until 1986. And I walked around. I didn't go into any of the buildings because they looked really dangerous. And that's why they said keep out, because it was obviously very dangerous.
Okay, yeah.
But there was one area that had been the staff flats that must have been done up and repapered and painted in the 60s. And, you know, they're still there. It was abandoned. The weather's got in, although it's covered by a roof. And this is just a little piece of wallpaper. And I just love the way the colours have faded towards the bottom. And it's coming away. Do you know that Leonard Cohen quote, which is, there's a crack in everything, and that's where the light gets in.
Oh,
I think this is a really good illustration of that. And again, you've got the pattern, and you've got the weathering. So it is part of a series of showing how things disintegrate, but can look very, very beautiful.
Well, I just feel like I want to actually just peel it open. I'm just intrigued at what's below that layer. If you just as tantalizingly wanting to peel it. Although when I first saw it, I thought it was getting a feeling of like stone or stone to it. It felt quite stone-like. Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, it's wallpaper, so it proves out what good quality they must have used.
Yeah, definitely.
These buildings are all made of Canadian cedar, so the roofs are still
Okay.
they've got sort of tiles made of Canadian cedar. Now this again, this is from the same. You can see the abandoned building through the back. This was through the window, and I did have a very sunny day there, so I got some quite nice. I like the fact that that's got light in the background. It's got light playing on it, and there again, there's I remember colours like this from being a child. Bright colour of the bright pink and oranges and turquoises, all peeled away. And apparently when this was abandoned, some travellers got in and they've stripped tiles off the walls, they've taken light switches, all the flooring's been pulled off. So now they're like skeletons, these buildings, with these, you know, this redolent of the life that must have been in that school. And sort of picked clean, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sense of, actually, you're talking about that kind of sense of history, and you know, if the walls could speak, there's a lot that could be said.
Well, the interesting thing is that the pupils from that school, they've got such happy memories, and they've got a Facebook page. Oh, wow, and they still keep in touch with each other, and they say, oh, do you remember so and so, and do you remember that teacher? So they're the ones that left in the 80s are probably in their 50s now, and they've had a reunion there. So it's quite an interesting site, because it's up for development. It's going to be pulled down. That's one of the reasons I wanted to photograph it, because it's going to be pulled down. I don't know when, and made into sort of lodges, you know, a sort of tourist place for people to stay, because there aren't enough places. It's right in the Yorkshire Dales. It's very beautiful. But yeah, the ex-pupils have got such lovely memories of coming out of Bradford, maybe having malnutrition, not fed properly, not thriving in back-to-back houses, and coming out to this beautiful countryside.
Literally a breath of fresh air for them, isn't it? Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
This place.
This is not the same place. This is one of the assignments that we were given. It was just after we could start moving around after lockdown. And one of the assignments was to get some shots of lettering.
Okay.
So we go down to Devon quite often, and this was in Kingsbridge, which is in the South Hams. Right. And around the back of Kingsbridge, there was a sort of little industrial area of garages, lockups, which I was thrilled to see, because in Cambridge you can't find anywhere like that anymore. It's all gone. It's all been developed. It's all smart. So just walking around Kingsbridge, I found this. I don't know what it was. I don't know what those letters are saying. They don't seem to make any sense. But again, somebody's put those letters up, and I love the soft colouring of the blue garage door, and then these stenciled letters. So again, it's got the same sense of a life that's over. What was it? I don't know. Again, there's that sense of not knowing. But it's just beautiful in itself, I feel.
See that rust. I love the rust that's, you know, especially at the top, and then the rust is fading away. It's again, there's a lot going on in that. There's
really a lot going on. Yeah,
great textures,
contrast of textures.
Okay.
And again, this was one of the joys of having my phone with me, because in Oxfordshire there's a house called Astle Manor.
Okay.
And every 2 years they have a sculpture exhibition in the grounds called On Form. And my husband's very interested in sculpture. So we on our way to Devon, we dropped into Astle Manor to see this exhibition. Beautiful house, beautiful grounds, you know, fantastic. We walked around, and then we thought we'll go and have a cup of tea. And what they'd done, which I thought was lovely, was they'd made the old gardener's area, the gardener's hut, into the tea serving area. So there were tables and chairs outside, but I said, I'll go and get us some tea and cakes. Oh, nice. And I went into this what looked like an old shed where they were serving tea. And I saw that someone had put 2 watercolors on the wall, and I said, "Oh, do you mind if I take a shot?" They said, "No, please feel free." So I took a few, and if I hadn't had my phone, I would have missed that. You know, I wasn't expecting to find a shot in the tea area, and it just seemed to have everything I love. It's got the geometric shapes, it's got the sense that has been used, has had another life. And someone's even put those watercolors in, which I think without the watercolors it wouldn't have had the same impact. But it's got the faded colors, it's got the paint that's peeling and the ivy coming through. And I love that one. I've had that one is printed on aluminium. I sold 2 of those in Open Studios because it's quite a people found it quite a compelling image.
It's a bit surprising to see the pictures there, isn't it? You know, maybe you'd expect to see the flowers in there because it's, you know, feels, you know, like that kind of space. But to see actual pictures there is, yeah, is I suppose a bit surprising. Lovely.
It's a nice touch, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, brilliant. Thank you. It's it's great to look through some of your pieces. I think we've gone through quite a lot actually. I think there are some, I think, already some takeaways that, you know, that you talked about already. But I think we can agree that, you know, there are lots of the way you think about your focus for your photography, but also think about when you take your shots, is that there is lots of opportunity to, you know, I suppose, yeah, there's lots of opportunity to take a number of different shots. But if someone's like thinking, okay, well, I'm wanting to kind of do similar work to what you're doing, and I want to get more into art photography, what advice would you give them?
Well, the first bit of advice is to just take lots and lots and lots of photographs, because you'll never be a good photographer by just taking one type of photograph. So take lots, you know, keep moving. When you're taking shots, move around so that you're not just doing one and thinking, well, I've done that. Maybe take 5 of the same thing. Get down. I often get down on the ground, so I've got a lower sort of viewpoint, which often certainly works for interiors. You need to get quite low. So take lots and lots of photographs and follow your passion, really. You know, what really interests you. And it doesn't matter if you haven't got a particular project to start with. I think the projects will start growing out of referring back. Keep looking at your photographs if you can get someone to look at them with you. And I would certainly check out 2 Photographers online photography group, because it's free. Every Tuesday morning they meet at 10 o'clock. If you look up 2 Photographers online, you'll see what we do. They do workshops in Bulgaria and in Spain, but this weekly just checking in. And then you can look at, they recommend photographers, they recommend Instagrams to look at. So you're learning. They have people coming and talking about their work, friends of theirs, which you pay generally about €30 for that. But you can go every Tuesday and just make a donation. So I've definitely be inspired, look at other people's work, talk to other photographers is a really good place to start. And I would say that don't feel that phone photography is inferior to having the best equipment. I think it can be a bit easy to think, if I have another lens, if I have a better camera, I'm going to be a better photographer. That isn't the case. It's only a tool. So if you can get a phone with good cameras on it, I would say definitely try that out. So you don't even have to pay, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds. But what I would recommend is to, if you're going to work on a phone, is to download an app called Snapseed. And that's a processing app. So it needs careful handling. You don't want to go too far with it, but you just adjust pictures and just make them, you know, bring out the texture, knock back the color a little bit, which I often do. Sharpen them so they have a bit more focus. So that's what I definitely do. and just follow your heart, really. Yeah, look at lots of other photographers' work. Look at art books. You know, look at painters. Don't only look at photographers. Look at painters, because you know, that's what painters did in the past. They followed their heart. They followed their passion. And then maybe quite a good idea would be to think, okay, I've done all this. What really interests me, and work on a project. So you've got maybe abandoned shops before they've gone forever. It was interesting in Cambridge. I don't know if you remember G's electrical shop. It was on Mill Road, and it had been there for years and years and years, and it only closed a few years ago. Okay. And I remember, I'm going to take a picture of G's before it's gone forever. The very next week, it burnt down.
Oh, wow.
So it really was before it's gone forever. Oh. But it was just an idea I got from a magazine called Black and White Photography, which I could definitely recommend. So although it's mostly black and white, they have such good articles on just not too technical and not too arty, just a lovely mixture of inspiration and help and tips and advice. And I'd definitely try and get a copy of that and get a subscription if you feel that it's worth it. But I found that very inspiring too.
Well, I mean, it's all those things just to find out what sparks you, isn't it, and get that inspiration from all different angles. And as I say, not just from photography, you know. And I think also it's like when it comes to, you know, great with the advance of technology now that phones are there to be used to be able to take that shot when you don't have your camera with you. And I think sort of, if that can then feed your passion for interest in photography, then you're just using kit for the right moment, and then when you're ready to get any other kit, then of course Campkins are here to help. But as long as people are taking shots, then happy days. Thanks.
Okay. I was going to say I did buy my camera and my lenses from Campkins.
Brilliant. Well, Owen and the team are always happy to help.
Very, very helpful.
And of course, you're going to, as you mentioned, you're going to be on a panel discussion about setting up studio, which is great. And then also you're going to be exhibiting some of your work as well. So that's going to be at the Hilton Hotel on Downing Street on Saturday, the 8th of October. If anyone wants to get a ticket, free admission tickets for the exhibition and talks, and also we are running a series of workshops as well that cost £20 each. So get online, cambridgephotography.com, get your tickets, and look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Well, thanks very much, Vilokini.
Well,
really appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed that, and hope to see people on Saturday next week. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks very much.